Welcome to the Illikus podcast. This is class number 10 in the discourse Tzion b'mishpat Tipadeh, which is the 11th discourse in the overall book, B'shash Ekdimu 5672. And we are going to begin chapter 44 today, which is the last chapter in the 11th discourse. We still have to finish the Kitzur, which is the little summary. I'm sorry I was off for about 2 weeks and haven't been broadcasting over here. So we're back. I hope you still remember what we were talking about, and that's going to refresh us by us learning the Kitzur. I really would like to finish the 11th Maimer by Pesach. So that's the objective over here. Maybe we can even start the 12th discourse and learn the first Perek. I doubt that will happen because that's really where the conclusion of the entire first section of B'shash Ekdimu is. Okay, so now of this whole big monumental study. Okay, Kitzur, let's do the summary from the last class. The main idea we were learning earlier was how the Sfirot is where the real limitations begin and definitions begin. When the Or Ein Sof, when the infinite light coming through the Kav, going through the various different levels, lands finally into the Kalim, into Atzilus, where there are Spheros, where there are, then they take form and shape. And when they take form and shape, we were learning they're different one from each other in many ways. One idea that makes one sphere different than the other, we were learning, is in the revelation of light. How much light is shining. In Chachma, there is much more light shining than Bina, and so on and so forth. The light becomes diminished. As we see when we have an initial epiphany and epiphanal idea in our mind, there's a lot of soul power over there. Once you start breaking it down in the left side of the mind, which is the Bina experience, you'll lose a lot of the intensity, a lot of that illumination, a lot of that power of the soul. And then in the intellect in general, there's much more energy than there is in the emotions, and so on and so forth. Everything gets downgraded. The energy of the soul, the presence of the soul itself, which is above these definitions, decreases from sphere to sphere. That was why the Kav is a measuring entity. Important is that there is a fundamental, what makes one higher, and dissects the Chachma, and whatever you have in the Chachma is like a general point, and the Bina just dissects it or expounds on it and develops it and extracts all the details of it. But as we learned in the earlier classes, that is only the external element of the Chachma. The real Pnimius of the Chachma never even carries over to Bina. If you remember, we were learning that was the vision of Chachma, and even when it's not a vision of Chachma, he called it Hanacha Sichlis, the upleg, the fact that the Chachma lays itself into a person as a certain truth, as a certain intellectual truth that you know, even though you can't grasp it and understand it in the understanding. So what Chachma gives to Bina is the seichel of the Chachma, the more intellectual, which is the very tail end of Chachma. That's what Chachma, and over there too, it's only a point, and that point goes over to Bina for Bina to chew on it and open it and develop it and expound on it and so on and so forth. But over here, he's just showing us how Chachma is essentially higher than Bina. Not only is Chachma is Chachma a point and Bina, but Chachma is fundamentally a whole. The essence of a reality makes itself known in the Chachma, but does never carry over the Bina. Bina is always only a description of something, so it's on the outside. And then he continued to explain how the emotions are really on the outside, because when you're emotionally relating to something, you're not in it at all. In the intellect, even in the Bina, at least you're exploring it. It's in the Chachma, you're exploring its essence. In Bina, you're inside the existence of it, although you're not in the essence of it, but at least you're in the existence of something. But in emotion, you're completely on the outside and you're just excited about it. You're not even inside the palace. You're not even inside that which you're excited about. You're on the outside. But even emotions, we learned, is still an internal experience of self. And then comes Malchus, which Malchus is only for someone else. So Malchus is the most limited element in the human experience, which is already lowering a person or lowering the energy down to go to the outside, to be an influencer to the outside. It's not about yourself anymore. Emotions are about how you're excited, even though you're excited about something other than yourself, but at least you're excited. But in Malchus, we learned it's completely about the dominion and the influence on the other. It's not about self at all. So therefore, the energy is much less, and essential quality of it is much lower. All that we learned in the earlier class, and now we're going to do the kitzur of it as he does over here. This is in between chapter 43 and chapter 44. And this is what we mean, the b'chachma meira orein sof. That in chachma, the orein sof, the infinite light, is shining b'kiruv, in close. So if you remember, we learned that it says in Arizal, in Eitz Chaim, it says that in chachma, the orein sof is shining in a very up and close manner, and in bina, it's shining at a greater distance. And in the Ze'er Anpin, it's only coming through a window. And I think in Malchus, it's only coming through a crack. Something like that we were learning. So he's explaining, what does it mean, kiruv makom? What does it mean, close? So if you remember, in the last class, we learned that he defines close on three aspects of closeness. And you could understand that from a human interaction. When someone shows kiruv to someone else, when someone is showing closeness to someone else, a teacher, an important official, a president, a king, a sage, a tzaddik, whoever, an important individual. When that person shows closeness to someone, it can be in three manners. Number one is that they spend time talking to them. That's called riboy, a lot. They're not going to give the person just a quick second, but they're going to sit down with them and let them talk to them for 10, 15 minutes. That's called closeness, or maybe an hour, or 2 hours, or 5 hours, whatever the relativity of it is. But the point over here is spending a lot of time with that individual. The second element we learned is when you're spending time with them, you're really shining to them. They feel like they got your complete attention, and you're fully engaged with them, and you're internally opening up to that individual. And as he called that, ha'aras hapanim, the radiance of the face. And the third thing of being close to an individual is when you say two people are close to each other, because they have a certain they're like-minded. Like two brothers, they think the same. Or two students of the same teacher have the same kind of philosophy, the same kind of worldview. That's called closeness. So he explained in the discourse how when we say Chachma is close, all these 3 points are true about it. Number one, we discussed earlier that in Chachma there is a lot of light, more than it is in Bina. That's called like the Orein Seif is talking a long time to Chachma, and in Bina, the Orein Seif is being very brief. There's not a lot of illumination. The other point was that in Chachma, remember, the essence of the Orein Sof reveals itself. In Bina, it's just an external description of it. So that's the idea of the ha'aras hapanim. When a person is close to someone, means they're looking in their eyes and they're allowing themselves to be open in a very deep place to the other individual. That's a closeness. That's a far more essential element where Chachma is higher than Bina, where we said Chachma is fundamentally above Bina. And then finally, the fact that Chachma, because Chachma receives the Orein Sof as the Orein Sof is, Chachma has the higher das, that God is and there's none but Him. Bina doesn't feel that anymore. Bina is already a convoluted, already distorted type of an experience, because Bina already does not see that truth with the same clarity of Chachma. Bina is a yesh, Chachma is ayin. So Chachma is like-minded to the Orein Sof. And that's the idea that the Orein Sof is close to Chachma. They think alike. The Orein, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that Chachma is the only one, the only sphera that can accommodate the truth of the Orein Sof. And Bina already, because Chachma can handle, Chachma can tolerate, Einoid Movade, there's nothing but God, because Chachma doesn't have to, Chachma is total bittul. So these are the 3 things we learned. So he's explaining it over here. In close, that means there's a lot of light. And the second point is point number one, the etzem ha'or, and the essence of the light. That's what we learned earlier, that in Chachma, above the sichli of Chachma, above the intelligence of Chachma lies the essence of Chachma, which is the hanacha, the fact that the Chachma is the fact that the Or Ein Sof is residing in the Chachma. Like in the seeing, when you look, remember we learned earlier the difference of hearing somebody, an audio of somebody, or listening secondhand from someone, or actually looking into the face of your teacher while they're teaching. The teacher can convey certain ideas that is not transmittable just with their words, something that's radiating from their face. My Periyas Pnei HaMashpia, the face of the Mashpia, Shemakabel B'zeh, one is receiving in this, Etzem HaSichli, the essence of the intellect. I'm just making a comment that I was sitting with someone on this Saturday night, Matzah Shabbos, and he was describing to me, he was 14 years old when he came to the Rebbe for Harkafas. He's a Hasidic guy from from the Polish Hasidim. And he was describing to me when he was 14 years old, and when he saw Harkafas, he says that face that was radiating when the Rebbe was dancing Harkafas, he says you can never see that. You just don't see that in the videos. You don't see that in the Fabrang. It's just a sight that just there's something, an internal radiance that was like unlike anything he's ever seen. So that's the pneumius of the pneumius of the pneumius that was radiating in those deep, highest moments. But this is the concept that there's something pnimi. There's something it's something of essence. And then there's the third thing. In Kiruv, the Chachma Mishtavel Kiruv. There's the other idea of Kiruv, where you say that someone is, the two people are like-minded. The Chachma Mishtavel El Or Ein Sof. The Chachma equals itself to the Or Ein Sof. In which sense? I know, even though Chachma is only a keli, a recipient, but it's a keli that is so silent. Chachma is such a silent keli. It doesn't interject with its yeshus, with its own beingness, so it allows the light to be itself. The substance of the Or Ein Sof that shines in the Riyah of Chachma. It's interesting. This is not so much in the lower parts of Chachma, but at least in the Riyah of Chachma, where you're seeing it as it is. As it is explained in the Maimer of V'kacha from the Rebbe Marash, the author's father, where over there he explains a famous series of discourses called V'kacha, where he explains the concept of Chachma. Chachma, yeah. So that concludes the idea. The first half of chapter 43 is a summary again of the first half of chapter 43, where he was explaining the kiruv makoim, the closeness that Chachma enjoys over Bina, which is called at a distance. And now he continues to in the chapter he continued to explain how when we say Chachma is fundamentally different than Bina, the same is also Bina is fundamentally different than the emotions, and the emotions are fundamentally different than Malchus. The same is also the Mochin are essentially considered higher in their essential level, not only more light, but they're essentially higher. In compared to emotions, shemas. Why? Shenasaga udveikus, because mochin is hasaga, is grasping, udveikus, and you're in a state of cleaving and attachment. When midos, but emotions is pilos, is excitement. And when you're excited about something, you're outside of it. Shechutz la'etzem, you're outside of the essence. Agam shem b'chinas yichud, and even though there is a yichud, agam shem b'chinas yichud, and even though the midos are also unified with Hashem, is still the unification of the midos cannot compare to the unification of the mochin. The mochin are called, like in the words of the Zohar, we learned iyu v'chiyu chad. He and his life forces are one, and the emotions are compared to what it says in the Zohar. He and his garments are one. He and his vessels are one. It's like the difference between the soul's unification with the powers of the soul versus the soul's unification with the physical body. Even though the soul becomes one with the body while the person is physically alive, you cannot compare that oneness to the extent of to the extent of how the soul is one with its power of intelligence. It's a much deeper type of a unity. So similar to that is the difference between how the soul is one with its intellect versus how it's one with its emotions. And the same is also in the spheres above, that in the Chabad, Hashem is so much more tied up and one with it than he's assimilated into it and one with it on a much deeper level than his assimilation and oneness with the emotions. Or Malchus, but Malchus is considered low Bahagilui in the revelation, because in Malchus is the least of the revelation, and its essential level, it is, first of all, there's much less light in Malchus. That's why Malchus has no light. Malchus is called Les Le Megar Meklum. She has nothing of its own. And also, in its essential level, Malchus is on a much lower, it's only for the outside, it's not for the inside, it's not for the, as discussed in the earlier class. Okay, with this we concluded chapter 43, and we begin chapter 34. Zohar Pashas Pinchas Daf Reish Nun Zayin, in Zohar Pashas Pinchas, in page 257 on the base and second side, Isa, it says, in other words, this idea. Now he's gonna bring this all home in this chapter, that when the Or Ein Sof emanates through the Kav towards the Or Pnimi, the internal light, because that's the whole point of what we're learning in all the discourse, is to explain the evolution of the Or Pnimi. If you remember, we discussed how the Or Pnimi begins even before the Tzimtzum. There is already Or Ein Sof B. Remember, we spoke the Esespheres Agnuzais. It's a level of Or Ein Sof, but over there, the Or Ein Sof, even though it's already leaning in 10 spheres, it's not a potential, so to speak, for infinite spheres ain't Kates, it's already, but over there, it's still Ein Sof. You can't tell anything. All the spheres are betachlis, apshitus, they're all totally one. There is no difference between one. They're all the 10 are one and singular, and one with the Or Ein Sof that's above it, together with Or Ein Sof A, indifferentiable, in undiscernible. But once there is a tzimtzum, the contraction, and the light of the kav comes out. Once the kav is already emerging outward, it's already, the kav, we learned, is already coming through the tzimtzum, and what that is doing is it's bringing forth the potential of the 10 spheros in a state of nekudot. Nekudot are points. Now, since the spheros over here are already beginning to line up as already spheros, but since it's only a point, it's only in the nekuda, it's only a point like a line that's made up of dots. Every sphere is still in a state of pshitus. You still don't hear and sense and feel the differences between the spheres at all. Although you can already tell that there is 10. But when can you really feel the 10 and really start seeing the difference in all aspects of the spheres? Number one, that each sphere is different in its quality. There's already a different quality over here. Number two, that there's more light in one and less light in the other. Right? And the spheros actually becoming very tangible, each one in their own. That's only when the oil goes into Kalim. That's what happens when it goes into Atzilus. So what really that leads us to is that Atzilus is just a revelation of the Esespheres Agnuzes. The 10 hidden spheres that are hidden b'matzila, which were utterly benign, that they are 10. It's pure Or Ein Sof. Through the traveling through the kav, through the first tzimtzum, and traveling through the kav, and finally landing in the vessels of the 10 spheros, now you can see that there is chachma, there is bina, and each one of them has its own parameters, definitions, limitations, and boundaries, configurations, and so on and so forth. And this is where it's all, you see where this is all going. So in Zohar, it says the whole sphera, that this idea that each sphera has its own characteristics and its own definitions and its own boundaries. The Zohar says the whole sphera is like Shem Yediyah. Every sphera has a knowable name. The fact that it has a name means it has its own description. Umida, and it has its own measure. Ugvul, and its own boundary. Utchum, and its own border. Or we might say Gvul, border, Utchum, and boundary. Cool. So he's going to explain what are these three expressions that the Zohar says that Sphirot, the Zohar wants to differentiate between the Sphiros and Hashem himself. The sphere is the Ein Sof, the Ein Sof, Hashem over there. There's no tchum, there's no midah, there's no name, there's no midah, there's no gvul, there's no tchum. All these things don't exist. But once there's spheroids, now there's already a name, there's already a midah, a measure, a gvul, a border, a tchum, and a boundary. What he's going to explain is these, based on what we learned earlier, he's going to explain what these three things mean: measure, border, and boundary, which we might think they're all the same. Why is the Zohar using three terms? Yeshleima, we can say, but based on what we explained earlier, now we'll understand. The midah, the measure, hamadida is the measurement, is the measurement that is related to the essence of the substance of the level of the sphere. What is that? That chachma is with this type of mohus, this type of substance. It's in this type of a level. And bina is in a complete different. Remember what we said? Chachma, it takes in the substance of something. Bina can only take in the metzius of something. Bina can only absorb the existence, meaning the definitions, the explanations of something, but not the substance of it. That difference between chachma and bina, that chachma is this type of quality and bina is that type of quality, that's the fundamental difference between the spheres. Now, even though this is already there, of course, in a very benign, hidden way, in the dots that are in the kav, and even higher than the dots and the kav in the Esa spheres Agnuz, is the fact that there are 10 spheres means that there's already 10 there. And why would they be different? Why would you count 10 if there's no difference between them? But over there, because it's all one with the Orein Sof still, the Orein Sof is still felt, then these differences are not nirgash at all. It's not sensed at all. But once it goes into Kalim, into Yatzilas, and that's where the mohus of the spheres start becoming, even without the meaning, it registers when it's in the kalim, but the difference over here is not only in the kalim, the difference over here is in the air itself, is in the light itself. And bina is in a different mohus. And so it is in all the spheres. This that their difference in their essence of their level. That's the idea of the measure. Now, he wants to prove that this is what measure means. That measure means the measurement of here. We're not talking an external measurement. It's not the size of something, of how long it is. But we're talking about a fundamental measurement, which means that this is measured like this, and this is measured like this. Means that fundamentally its character is as follows. So he wants to prove that that's what measure can mean. So he proves it from the Pirush of Nachmanides, of Ramban, on the Book of Formation, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Hey, first chapter, Mishnah Hey, fifth Mishnah. If Sefer Yetzirah, it says like this. Over there it says, Midasan Eser, that the spheros, they have their measurement is 10, She'ein lahem soif, but have no end. So the commentators over here are very troubled. How can you say they're 10 and say that they have no end? If you say they're 10, then it's a limit. Then it's a limitation. That means it has an end because you're limiting it. It's a fixed number, and then you say there is no end. So the Ramban says like this: the Kosev, this is the way he understands it. Even though the matters, when he says the matters over here, he's referring to the sphirot, the attributes. They have a shear. They have a limit. They have a shear. They have an amount, so to speak, 10. Or midah and a measurement, and eser, and which are 10. However, oisam midah, that measurement, sheyeshlam, that they have, ein lo stuff. Soif has no end. What does that mean? They have character. It's chachma. But how much chachma is it? Infinite chachma. How much bina is it? Infinite bina. How much kindness is it? It's limitless kindness. So hold it. So then, what's the midah? What's the measurement? So you have to, if it's limitless, so what's the measurement? The measurement is the fact that it is chesed, that it is characterized by kindness, the fact that it is, which means fundamentally each sphere is different than the other. And chachma is, as we said before, an intake of the essence of something, and Bina is a exploration of the understanding of something. And in our case, the understanding of the Or Ein Sof, or whatever Bina can know of the Or Ein Sof. And that's B'li Gvul, without an end, but it's still only the chitzonius of it, only the external, only what is descriptive of it. Venera, so it appears the Inyan Midah, the idea of the Midah, who be'etzam amahus, is in the essence of the substance, and the emotions are on the outside. They're not even going into the inside of the Or Ein Sof. However, and their excitement, but how much excitement? Limitlessly excited. There's no end to their excitement. Each one differently. The chesed in a chesed way, the gevura in a gevura way. Each one. The inyan mido be'etzam amahus shebezeh hamischalkem le'eser, and this is what divides them into 10. In a kol midah, each midah who b'pchenas Ein Sof is in a state of Ein Sof. However, the main point that he wants over here is to show you that when it says midah, we're talking about an essential quality. That's what's called the measure. The measure is how it is essentially characterized. And he proves it. So that's Ramban supports that. Now he says in the parentheses, V'harayvid zal. However, the Reuven is another great Kabbalist and great also known in Halacha as well. Ramban is also known in Halacha. So the Reuven, Reb Avram ben David, I think, Mefarisham, he has a different explanation. He explains when we say that they're without an end, they're 10 without an end, the Ein Sof is not each sphera is without an end. The Ein Sof is the fact that they're 10. The 10 itself, in the see, according to Ramban, first it says there's a number, there's 10. And that's a limitation. There's 10 and not more. The non-limitation is in each one, how much does that one sphera expand? It's infinity. But there are 10. And 10 is an aspect of a limitation. According to Reuven, the Pirush is that when it says Eser without an end means that the 10 itself is limitless. Why? Meaning within the number 10. Because 10 is a perfect number and it includes everything, and therefore in the 10 you can go on and 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 on. I guess maybe from the fact that you can have blends without an end blending. Inyan es who ain't safe be inyan eser. That the idea of 10, that's the shleimus over here that makes it Ein Sof. And he says, because the Or Ein Sof, because the infinite one above the spheros is connecting to the spheros, that's why when he lands in the spheros, it's in a number of 10, because 10 is a number of, why? Because think about it. Once you have 9 is single digits, 10 is already looping over to infinity. Because it goes to 10, and then it will go to 100, and then it goes to. The fact that it goes back and it goes on and on and on. If it would only be 9, it's single digits. That's it. You end over there. But 10 means you can make double, you can make triple. It's that number that's the idea of the Ein Sof of it. Venera, he says, he says that you can fetch that. You can say that also. The Ramban also sees the Ein Sof like the Reuven. In his words that he says later, Kiyan Mutpa, there are words, I mean, I can share it over here, but it's Nishno Geya so much, but from the words of Ramban in his Pirush over there to continue of what he's saying in his continuation of the passage can agree with Reuven's Pirush as well. So, and both of them are true. The Ein Sof, when we say it's Ein Sof the spheres, it means two things. The sphere itself, each sphere is Ein Sof in its expansion. Number 2, also the fact that it's number 10 is also an infinity. And both are true. But for what we needed over here, he derives from Nachmanides, from the fact that he translates Midah, meaning that each one has a characteristic. Now, what else did it say in the Zohar? It says in the Zohar that in addition to having a Midah, they also have a Gevul and a Tchum. So what's the Gevul and the Tchum? So he's going to explain the Gevul, it has to do with how much light is shining in each sphere. In Chachma, there is a lot of light. In other words, in addition to the substance of Chachma, that Chachma receives the essence and Bina doesn't receive the essence. We said earlier that in Chachma there's a lot of light, and in Bina there's a little bit of light, less light. So that's the concept of Gvul, is the border. And what's the Tchum? He's going to explain. Tchum, which is a boundary, is related to a more external boundary. Border would be, the Gvul would be a more inherent boundary, and Tchum would mean an external boundary. And he's going to explain the difference is because the Gvul is the limitation that is from the light itself, how much light shines in each sphere, and that's even without the vessels. There is a certain illumination to each sphere in terms of how much is the Or Ein Sof revealing itself in each sphere. And that is different just because of the light without the vessels. And then Tchum is that the vessels itself curb the light and curtail the light and limit the light. And of course, Chachma's vessels limit the light because Chachma is very refined vessels. So Chachma's vessels don't limit the light that much. Bina has thicker vessels and it limits the lights more. And so on. The thicker the vessels are, the denser they are, the more limited, the more boundaries they put on the light. It's like a thicker curtain. But that's already a limitation coming from the outside, coming from the Kalim. Well, let's leave that for the next class, how we're going to explain the difference between Gvul and Midah. And then he's going to circle back how all of this is really produced by the Kav. And the reason the Kav is this way is because the Kav is rooted in, even before the Tzimtzum, the Kav is rooted in the Esespheres Agnuzos, which is already a somewhat of a limitation in the Or Ein Sof. As the whole point that we were learning, that the Or Pnimi is, from the very, very get-go, is an Or Pnimi. It's not an Or Makif, which is the whole theme that we've been learning, is all going to be coming together, Be'ezus Hashem, in the next few classes. Meanwhile, let's see Mashiach today.